It's 11:47 p.m. You told yourself you'd finally start tonight. The course, the workout plan, the business idea. Instead, you're on your ninth scroll, whispering just 5 more minutes. The same 5 minutes you promised yourself yesterday and the day before that. Here's the part that should actually scare you. The version of you 5 years from now already exists, right now, in your head. You already know exactly who you'll be if nothing changes. Same inputs, same output, every single day. Nobody chained you to that bed, that couch, that scroll. You walked there yourself, one small yes at a time, and it felt like relief, not danger. It never felt like the thing costing you your life. It just felt like tonight, and tonight always felt like nothing. But look at the evidence. The gym membership you haven't used since January, the draft saved in your notes app for 8 months, the conversation you keep rehearsing but never having. None of these moments felt like failure when they happened. Each one felt like, not today. And not today, repeated enough times, quietly becomes never. So here's the real question. Not, are you comfortable? But how long have you been telling yourself this is temporary? And here's where it gets worse. Most people who finally notice this don't fix it. They try to escape comfort the wrong way entirely and end up right back where they started, just exhausted this time. So what's the wrong way people try to escape it? They wait to feel ready. Waiting to feel ready isn't laziness, it's comfort wearing the costume of ambition. You research the workout plan instead of doing it. You watch one more video on how to start the business instead of starting it. You tell yourself you're preparing, and it feels productive. It feels responsible. It even feels like progress. It isn't. It's the same couch, the same scroll, just wearing a nicer outfit. And when the motivation you were waiting for finally does show up and then vanishes 3 days later, something worse happens than just quitting. You don't just fall back into comfort. You fall back believing the attempt proved something, that you tried and it confirmed you're not the type of person who changes. So the next time the urge shows up, it's quieter, easier to talk yourself out of. Here's the guy who saved the Start a Side Hustle video to watch later, 11 months ago. He still hasn't opened it, not because he's lazy, because he was waiting for a feeling that clocked out the same week he saved it, and nobody ever told him it wasn't coming back on its own. But here's what makes this worse than it sounds. The people who do manage to push through motivation's collapse usually think they've solved it. They haven't. There's a second trap waiting right after the first one, and it's the one that quietly convinces even disciplined people to give up because it doesn't look like failure. It looks like success. Remember how I said it looks like success, not failure? Here's what that actually looks like. He wakes up at 5 a.m. for 12 days straight, feels like a new man. Day 13, he sleeps in just this once, and by day 20, 5 a.m. is a story he tells, not a thing he does. He wasn't lazy on day 13, he was proud. He'd already compared this version of himself to the one from 3 weeks ago, seen the gap, and quietly decided the work was done. Except it wasn't. He'd just redecorated the same room. Actual growth doesn't have a finish line, it has a thermostat. The moment something starts feeling manageable, that's not a stopping point. It's a setting that needs to go up again. Not because you failed. Ease isn't the reward. Ease is the signal. This is the part almost nobody wants to hear. There is no version of this where you eventually arrive somewhere permanent. Every plateau you reach, comfort is already moving in behind you, quietly convincing you the gap is closed, the work is finished, you've done enough. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If comfort keeps coming back no matter how much ground you gain, here's what that actually costs you if you never fully win the fight. Picture 2 people, same starting point, 10 years apart. Person A kept raising the thermostat, chose the harder 5 minutes over the easier scroll again and again for a decade. Person B did what felt reasonable at every fork. Rested when tired, waited for motivation, called it balance. 10 years later, person A isn't rich, isn't famous, but is capable of things person B secretly wishes they still believed they could do. Person B has the same job title at a different company, and "I'll start Monday" is still their favorite sentence, just older now. Neither made one catastrophic decision. There was no crash, no rock bottom, nothing either could point to and say, "That's where it went wrong." That's what makes this so dangerous. The cost never arrives as one large bill. It arrives as thousands of small, forgettable ones. The workout skipped, the pitch never sent, the apology never made. Each one felt irrelevant on its own. By the time most people feel the weight of it, it doesn't show up as motivation to change. It shows up as grief for a version of themselves that quietly stopped existing somewhere around year 3, and nobody sent a notice when it happened. That particular kind of regret doesn't fade with age, it sharpens. So if the bill is coming either way, the only real question left is whether there's a way to actually stop paying it. There is. Most people are just going about it completely backwards. So that's the weight of it. Here's the part that actually changes something. Most people try to fix this by removing discomfort from their life entirely. Better routines, better environments, fewer obstacles. They're trying to engineer a life with less friction, thinking that's what winning looks like. But friction was never the enemy. It's the mechanism. The same way a kite doesn't fly because the wind stopped. It flies because it didn't. Flip the goal. Instead of asking, "How do I make this easier?" start asking, "What's the smallest hard thing I can do today that I'd normally avoid?" Not the biggest, not the most impressive, the smallest one, because the size doesn't matter yet. What matters is proving to yourself in a small enough dose to actually follow through that you're someone who moves toward resistance instead of away from it. This is the part that should feel like relief instead of pressure. You don't need a complete life overhaul. Remember the version of you that just kept choosing the harder 5 minutes, one ordinary day at a time for 10 years straight? They didn't have one dramatic year. They just never negotiated. The same compounding that quietly destroyed a decade is the exact same force that can just as quietly build one. Same mechanism, opposite direction. Which means the gap between who you are and who you could become was never about talent, luck, or timing. It was always about which way you pointed the compounding. And the compounding doesn't check what day it is. It starts the moment you point it the other way. Here's what nobody mentions about pointing the compounding the other way. It doesn't feel like transformation while it's happening. It feels boring, almost disappointingly small. Day 41, you send the email at 9 a.m. without rereading it 11 times first. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It just feels like an email. Nothing about it matches the version of you that you picture in your head. Stronger, calmer, unshakable. That version doesn't arrive in a flash. It arrives the way the bill did. Quietly, in small deposits nobody's applauding. This is where most people quit a second time. Not because it's hard, but because it's unglamorous. They expected identity change to feel like a movie montage. Instead, it feels like Tuesday. And when Tuesday doesn't feel different, they assume nothing is working. But identity was never built by how a moment feels. It's built by what you do when it doesn't feel like anything at all. Every time you choose the harder 5 minutes without needing to feel motivated, without needing proof, without needing anyone to notice, you're not having a breakthrough. You're compounding in the other direction. Same mechanism as before, just running long enough that it starts to look like a different person. That's what the thumbnail meant. Not a crisis, not a rock bottom, just a Tuesday repeated enough times, in whichever direction you chose. So, here's where this leaves you. Comfort was never the enemy that shows up with a warning. It's the one that shows up disguised as rest, as balance, as "I'll start Monday." And it wins not through force, but through 1,000 small surrenders you never noticed making. Comfort kills, not with a single decision, but with the compounding of every ordinary day you let it choose for you instead of the other way around. But now you know the mechanism. You know motivation was never the missing piece, action was. You know the plateau isn't the finish line, it's comfort in disguise. You know the cost doesn't arrive as a crash, it arrives as grief for a person who quietly stopped existing around year 3. And you know the way out isn't a dramatic overhaul, it's the smallest hard thing, chosen today and again tomorrow, until the compounding runs in a different direction long enough to look like a different person. None of this happens in one decision. It happens in the next one, the next 5 minutes, the next email you send without rereading it 11 times, the next morning you get up when it would have been easier not to. You don't need to become someone new today. You just need to stop letting today look exactly like yesterday. That's the whole warning and the whole way out in 3 words. Comfort kills, unless you start pointing it the other way, starting with this one.